Hi, Krista. It's Trans Day of Remembrance.
So we thought it would be appropriate to bring some real-life trans people onto the internet to talk about it. Also, it's just us. We're the trans people we're bringing onto the internet.
Yep.
Tell me your thoughts on Trans Day of Remembrance.
Everybody else in the acronym gets, like, all of the shiny, colorful shit and the, like, pride and happiness. And, like, we get fucking dead people for a day. Let's talk about how many people died this year who were trans. And it's like, this is the most visible holiday for trans people. This is the most visible day for trans people.
And it's not
You know?
like we don't want you to stop murdering us. Don't get me wrong, internet. We would like it if you stopped murdering trans women. Please
don't do that shit. Just don't do it. It's like, well, we do that so we don't have to do anything else. It's an excuse for them not doing anything else for,
things have gotten better. There are a number of student groups, student organizations, a number of community organizations that now do a Trans Week of visibility around Trans Day of Remembrance.
Still, most people within, like, institutional context manage to present Trans Day of Remembrance in really racist ways, which is really messed up.
Most of the Trans Day of Remembrance celebrations aren't centering trans women of color. They're not about bringing attention to the voices and lives of trans women of color. They're about acknowledging the loss of trans women of color. It's a hurt that we genuinely feel and should be mourned. And also, the reason that the loss is happening is because the lives of trans women of color are not valued enough by society in general and in our community specifically. We need to see trans women of color and their lives as whole and complex and valuable.
In, like, LGBT circles, a lot of the organizing is dominated by, like, cis white folks. They have a list and maybe sometimes pictures or some sort of visual representation, but they never talk about it like, oh, this is also a problem that intersects with racism. Like, oh, trans people died, it's sad. And we as cis white people can then, like, we've done our penance, because we have this one day, but we don't talk about racism, and we barely talk about trans misogyny, and we barely talk about trans people dying, except for this one 24-hour period where we put up some flags.
There isn't a day where, as a queer community, we come together and talk about race.
No.
When is that day going to happen?
There should be many days of that.
Lots of days where queer white folks come together and have lots of uncomfortable, long discussions about race and how it is made both invisible and powerful in America. In LGBTQ organizations, it's mostly LG, and it's mostly cis, white, lesbian, and gay folks. And when that is a center for a movement that is partially cultural, it means that some people are culturally excluded from your movement. And when those people are also the people who are being put at most risk, it means your movement is failing to address, like, violence.
In a really fundamental, obvious way.
Yeah.
You don't get to, like, get a write-off in one day. You don't get to feel better about it because you had November 20th, you spent some time thinking about sad things that are my life every day, and even more so, the lives of trans women of color every single fucking day.
Feeling bad makes our situation and the situation of trans women of color about you. That's not what we're about. The thing is, you should only feel bad to the degree that it motivates you to do something about it. Things like viewing the queer community as a whole and centering the most fucking marginalized voices. God damn it. So I guess in closing, like, our list of demands are pretty straightforward. It's not that we want you to stop with Trans Day of Remembrance. Trans Day of Remembrance is a good, important, long-standing holiday. It's that Trans Day of Remembrance is the only day where trans folks are regularly recognized by LGBT community organizations. Talking about race is important when talking about Trans Day of Remembrance because the dynamics of who is getting killed, they're racial.
For me, Trans Day of Remembrance is about survival, because every day is about survival for trans women, and It's not about survival for the cis white folks who do most of the organizing for Trans Day of Remembrance stuff. For them, it's about absolving them from having to think about how many trans women die any other day of the year. So, yeah, it should be more about celebrating survival and celebrating the lives of trans women of color. All those trans women of color who die every year, we should be celebrating the fact that they survived as long as they did, more than centering the experiences of cis white folks being sad.